I wouldn't exactly describe that as an eruption. Is there more eruption possible? Because look who we have. Look at that. So exciting to be here tonight. I've got a few things to get through before I officially introduce Brooke. So she's not here right now, okay? Hold your excitement. First, before we go any further, I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the lands today of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, traditional custodians of the land on which this event is taking place, and acknowledge our First Nations people with us today. I want to say treaties have never been signed, yet we're on the pathway, and I hope that with the spirit of this state that we will find our way there. And this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. There's a beautiful bookseller down the back there. Look at that. They're feeling hot tonight. Readings, of course, who are going to be selling copies of Brooke's book, debut essay collection, all of it. And so they'll be signing, etc., at the end of this conversation. And also, I'm going to leave some time for you to ask questions. So cogitate. How good is that word? It sounds like a rude word, but it's not. Cogitate while you're listening tonight. And perhaps it would be great to get some of your questions and thoughts around some of the things that we will discuss as part of this book tonight. But we are here tonight to discuss this beautifully illuminating and insightful, I guess it's a memoir, it's a collection of essays, journalist, academic.
Stop.
I love it. Oh. Media legend, who you might know for her work on radio. That's where I met her, on Triple J, print, television, of course, most recently on Channel 9's Today Show. But most significantly, Brooke is a Gamilaroi woman. And you know what I love? I get goosebumps saying this out loud. I'm so excited I get to say this. The first Aboriginal woman to hold a significant broadcasting position in commercial television. Let's just welcome her with all of our hearts.
Oh, you're so generous. That was so lovely. Thank you.
It's not generous. I feel quite emotional about you. And you don't know that I have been watching you, and I've been watching you since Triple J. I'm an ABC kid as well.
Well, there is a lot about stalking in there, so just,
I did actually go, is she talking about me? Oh, my God.
Oh, my God, I found out.
We are going to get into stalking in this conversation because there was surprising things in this memoir, our collection of essays. Do we call it a memoir?
I've been calling it a collection of essays, but everyone that I've spoken to has called it a memoir. I don't know that this is what I would write if I knew I was writing a memoir.
I love that.
But I can understand why people would say that.
Yeah, I agree. I think this goes into spaces that are not explicitly you. They're reflections on the world around you. We look at football culture. We look at all sorts of things. We do delve into your life in a beautiful, intimate way. And again, I'm just sort of really pumped to be here tonight because when I say I'm going to interview Brooke Boney, everyone's like, oh, she's so interesting. And you are in so many ways that will be revealed in this conversation around the way that you have really experienced this country and this world, mainstream culture, in all the ways that you have done it. I really am looking forward to our conversation tonight. But I really want to know, when I do that intro, and it's only barely scratching the surface of what you have done and what you think about and what you have achieved and will achieve. What would little Brookie be thinking when she heard that?
Well, that's funny because I think that's part of why I don't sit comfortably with it being called a memoir, because I feel like then I'm resting on my laurels and I'm like, all right, I'm done. I'm semi-retired now. And so I think, when I hear you talk about all those things, firstly, I'm like, oh, no wonder I'm tired. And then secondly, I'm like, it just feels a bit surreal, to be honest.
Yeah.
Even I had a moment the other day when I was on my way back and I thought, I'm taking a break from Oxford to come and tour my book. Who do I think I am?
That's a great sentence, isn't it?
I know.
I would
And
throw
this is
that
my life. I
sentence
feel
in
so
while you're getting a
grateful.
coffee. Just say, "Oh, I'm just here because I'm taking a break from Oxford. I just need a soy latte, and I'm about to go into my book."
Yeah.
Because it's incredible, isn't it?
It's so wonderful. These are things that I have dreamed of. And I think it's so rare for your dreams to come true. And so I'm like sitting in this space now. I remember going for a walk with a friend maybe like 7 or 8 years ago around like the cliffs near Bondi. And he was at Oxford at the time and he was writing a book. And I was like, gosh, imagine that. I would never be able to do that. And I was so in awe of his ability to be able to do both of those things. And now to be in that position, I don't even know how to describe it. It feels surreal.
There's so much that I want to talk to you about that space as well, because in the book you say whenever you look at an Aboriginal person who has done something, found their way through the world, and we see them in whatever way, you look at them and you think, shit, you've worked really hard to be here. And reading this book, we just get a sniff of it. We get a really strong sniff of it. But I know when you write your memoir, there'll be much a stronger sense of what it has been for you to find your way here. This isn't just Brooke found her way and how exciting and wow, Oxford and TV and all the things that you've achieved.
Yeah.
This is hard work that started with your granddad saying, if you want to be somewhere, you've got to find yourself working the hardest.
You do. And I think like as black fellas, it's not good enough for you to just be like, okay, well, I'm gonna just show up and do, the bare minimum or even just do the same as everyone else. Like we were always taught from when we were very little that to, for anyone to have any respect for us, our worthiness comes from overperforming. To be considered equal or worthy of anything, that you have to be exceptional. And, in hindsight, it's really quite unhealthy. And so I think like the way that I think about some of those accolades now, like the way that Channel 9 put me on as the first Aboriginal woman in that context, it's like, yes, I'm super proud of it because it shouldn't be a thing and, like it always should have happened. But at the same time, it sort of lends itself to this bootstraps argument that's like, well, if I can do it, then, anyone can. And I hope that it's like, that people find some sort of inspiration or comfort in it that, oh, well, if she can do it, then I can. But then I don't like when people sort of twist it and they're like, well, if she can do it, you should do it. Like there's no excuse for you not to be able to achieve because if others can, that means you're lazy or something like that.
What a beautiful and insightful distinction that is as well, because it's so true, isn't it? And you are in this absolutely complex space of just being Brooke, coming from where you come from, the life you've lived, but we don't understand often, white Australians or those that don't carry an intersection that becomes defining, that when you step up and be seen, you are everyone. You are, the representation of Aboriginal woman. And the complexity of that is quite incredible, isn't it? Because at once, as you say, it's important that the little girls at home see you, but also we need to recognise that systemically capacity for that to happen is really not available in this country always.
I think that that's important because you don't want there to be a situation where the person who does stand up is always having to shoulder the burden of explaining things and having that generosity of spirit and strength to explain, every time something happens and you sort of – I think back to when I was on the Today Show and it was when the Black Lives Matter stuff was happening in the US. And I came on and I spoke about breaking the story about David Dungay Jr. when I was at the ABC and how complicated that was and how difficult it was to get people to believe that that was an actual story. And like you don't want to be the person who always has to bear the burden of those things, but also you feel the responsibility to do it because you're in this space to do it, if that makes sense.
Oh, it really does. It's actually what I wanted to get onto later with you, but we're here now. And it's something I thought about when I saw you on Today, probably in the early moments of that, January 26th comes up and you're almost like, by virtue of your identity, having to, as you say, explain or give a perspective that's not required of anyone else really on that in that journalism field. No one's actually asked to say, okay, you now need to talk to us as your humanity and come and put yourself on the line. I've seen it happen with Tony Armstrong. We see it happen with Indigenous journalists and people of colour right across the spectrum. How did you manage that? How did you, and obviously it's a huge thing.
I think I managed. It was really awful. Like, it was really hard. And when I look back at the videos now, because you get the reminders every year, and it's hard to watch for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I think I was so naive in thinking that, I remember after I said it, and I was like to the social media girls at work, like, oh, can you clip that up so I can share it? Because I was like, I want people to see it, not thinking that there would be much of a reaction or that it was not going to, nobody was really going to notice it. That was like the opposite. I was getting calls from like the New York Times and from like other countries, and like everyone was like, what? She said this thing in this, this mainstream space that I thought it was so normal because I was used to being on Triple J. And we'd just gone through this whole thing with, changing the date of the hottest 100. And so it seemed, and also because it's such a common perspective among Aboriginal people to have thoughts or, and in terms of all of the thoughts about that date for Aboriginal people, it's kind of a conservative one. I'm saying like, oh, do what you want, but like this is why I feel uncomfortable about it and why I don't do anything. Like there are others with perspectives that are really different to that. So then like to jump on telly and be like, oh, by the way, I don't like that, for all of these reasons. And then be like, oh, can you clip that up so people can see it? And then it just blows up. It was so bizarre. And I remember my friend Janine's here because we were in Melbourne for the tennis. And I remember we went for a walk. She's like, we just need to get out of the city. We went for a walk somewhere. And I remember every time someone would look at me, I was like, oh, they hate me. I felt this this visibility that I'd never had before because radio, it was just my voice. Like all people knew of me before that was like, Yama, it's Brooke Boney with Triple J News. And then it just turned into this thing where people knew exactly what I looked like and had really strong opinions about it. And it was to an audience that was kind of hostile towards any criticism about national identity. So it was hard. It was really hard. It took me a while to get over it. And I think it made me less brave.
Isn't that exactly, I suppose, the intent of pushback like that is, we don't disrupt our spaces with, ideas like that. It takes me into the first part of your book where you talk about celebrity. And it's such an important thing, I think, especially for our young people to read about, the experience that you had with celebrity. I love that you sort of sat outside it and watched it and wondered about it and then are able to sort of report back. The first chapter is really a letter, you're writing this, not a letter, but you're writing this on the eve of going out and saying, look, it's time for me to hang up my whatever you hang up when you're on TV. What do you hang up?
Maybe a mic packs. I don't know. Your little
something, your little in-ear thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
And that experience is I want to talk to you about, but also this really horrific insight into what celebrity really is. And you say, look, I'm not even like that big.
I'm not even like that famous. It's like this mild level of fame, but has this huge impact. And I think especially, and I mean, I don't know if there's lots of people who work on radio and TV who have similar experiences. I think like the whole nature of it is that it's intimate, right? Like if you want to be able to connect with people, then your job is to invite people in. And, if people are unwell or if they, I guess have issues, then they attach in weird ways. And my experience of it has been awful. I feel like the entire time I've been on TV or radio, I've had stalkers of some description. And some of them might range from like, someone showing up at work or, sending a lot of messages or whatever. And then there was someone actually in my house at one stage.
That was just so shocking to read. And almost what was really eye-opening was, and I'd love you to tell this story. You will read it though, so make sure you get this. Where you were driving home from work, you're being followed, and you eventually, after going through many things and being sure that there is someone following you in a car.
Yeah, because you get so paranoid.
That's interesting as well. You stop the car though and you say, look, okay, you're either going to kill me or whatever's going to happen here, but I may as well face it. So you go across to them. And what they said to you when they, I'd love you to tell that story.
So I finished work at Channel 9. It was when we were back over in the old building. So I drove out. Then a car pulled out behind me, and then I noticed that it just was going the same route. And it's a kind of odd way to drive, right? Like you're driving through these streets in residential part of like northern Sydney, and then you go over the bridge, and then to go to my place, you'd like turn off at the certain thing. And then I was like, this car is still there. Either I have not had enough sleep, which is definitely true, and I'm being like just a bit paranoid, or this guy's following me. And because I'd been through all this stuff with the January 26th debate, I was like, is this someone who wants to harm me in some way? Or is this someone who's like obsessed and fixated in some way? Or is this like a paparazzi? And so then I called the Channel 9 publicist and I was like, there's a car following me. I don't know what to do. And he was like, okay, don't go home because otherwise then they're going to know where you live. So either go to the police or go to a shopping centre. And then I sort of got towards Bondi Junction, which is like where the shopping centre is. And I was like, you know what? F this. If he wants to hurt me, like, come on then. Like, what have you got? Too brave. I feel like I think I'm like a bodybuilder or something. Like I think I'm like so tough. I'm not.
You are so tough.
I'm actually not. Like I feel like I could not fight.
No, I know.
Or maybe I could.
I reckon you could actually. Do you want to wrestle?
The only one way to find out. Yeah. Strip to the waist, fight to the death.
This is what you
didn't think
tonight.
This was going to end up like this. So then I just like got out of the car and I was so angry that someone had so much power over me in that moment. And they were like anonymous and sneaky about it. It's so insidious. So I just like pulled on my handbrake, got out of the car, and I was like, mate, what are you doing? But then he sort of hid. Then he pulled over, and then I was like, I'm going to key his car. Like I'm going to why is he doing this? And then I like looked in the car. There's all this camera gear and stuff, and I was like, oh my God, he's a photographer. So then I was still on the phone to the publicist, and he was sort of coming towards me, the guy then, and I was like, what are you doing? He's like, I just want to get a couple of photos. This is all part of the job now. And I was like, no, it's not. What are you talking about?
He said to you, this is now the world you're in.
Yeah. And I was like, are you kidding yourself? Like, no. And he's like, just walk up and down the street. Just pretend you're on the phone. I'll get my photos and I'll leave you alone. And in that moment, you're so powerless because otherwise what are you going to do? They're just going to follow you around for the rest of the day, drive you insane. And so then I did. I just like walked up and down the street, had a big smile on my face, and I was on the phone. And then if you looked at the photos, you'd be like, oh my gosh, she's so happy. Like, what a fancy free. Look at her. Just having a nice moment in the sun. But that was not the case at all.
And then he sent you a message later on.
Well, as I was walking away and I got back in the car and I sort of felt like turning around and like flipping him the bird or something. And then he was like, oh, by the way, thanks for all the work you do in the diversity space. I was like, you're welcome.
You have made me fear for my life.
Yeah.
I have, I'm unsafe with you doing this, but yet you commend me for my work.
Yeah.
The incongruity is probably, really deep in that first chapter, talking about that space between, being successful, going out there, sharing you and doing the stuff that you love to do, but then also having this paranoia that there is this stuff happening around you, that you have had stalkers, you've had those people follow you. And it's really common. This is what, you and your colleagues in celebrity world talk about just how unnerving it is.
Well, this is the thing that I was trying to impress when I was writing it, because I was like, this is my experience and it's not a unique one. it's like this weird, and I think we have more language for it now than what we had even like a year or two ago. It's like this weird parasocial relationship that people have with, with people who are on TV or on the internet or whatever. And I think the thing that always like struck me was like I'd be doing these interviews with these huge celebrities, like Dua Lipa or Elton John or like Tom Hanks or whatever. And so if I have this like huge level of discomfort from being like a tiny bit famous, then imagine what their lives would be like. They would be constantly under threat, even if they have this like incredible infrastructure around them where they can have security or they can, whatever. There would always be people that would find ways around, like they'd be able to penetrate it. Like that Drew Barrymore incident, that came up as a clip the other day for me where she had a stalker come to, like a live show that she was recording and sort of comes up to speak to it, gets within like a few feet. Like they put on these masks and go out and like perform and do the things that they have to do. But there's all this that's happening in the background that's like actually quite dark and quite threatening.
Yeah.
So like I was just always really interested in the dynamic between those two things, because I think you have to want one thing really badly or not be affected by it to be able to endure the discomfort.
And it's almost a shame that smart and important women like you are put in those situations to have to say, is it worth it? And ultimately the answer we know now is that perhaps it wasn't and perhaps it's not. Is that a fair assessment? You made a choice then to go and study at Oxford, which is just, even hearing you doing that, I was so fascinated by that decision-making process for you to get there, because it's also a good world of making money and supporting family and doing all the things
being
that you can do.
Lots of wonderful things.
Yeah.
I think like there are a few things that coalesced, and I think when I look at it now, it's such a snapshot of exactly where I was in the moment where I made those decisions and the things that were really affecting me. And to look at in the wake of the referendum and, and me sort of coming up to being on the show for 5 years and, having to put up with this. And just before all of this, that was when I had one stalker that was it was pretty bad. Like he was going into work all the time. The police sort of figured out that he was trying to break into people's homes because he thought that I lived there because he was having delusions. They'd already picked him up like a bunch of times, but no one had notified me, and I didn't, like even Channel 9 didn't know. So we were like, oh, like you're at risk. What if for some reason he had seen me or followed me home from work? Then he would know where I lived and he would be able to break into my house. And when you're going to work at like 4 o'clock in the morning and it's dark and there's no one else in the car park, and it might only be like 50 metres through a car park, but that 50 metres, like a lot can happen. And so all of those things, like that low level of like vigilance and, the sadness that I felt after the referendum and, the length of time that I'd been there, all sort of started swirling. And I was like, I don't know, the balance is sort of tipping towards going to do this other thing that I feel would be really fulfilling. But, like now being back here now, it's so beautiful. Like I just love Australia so much.
Oh, we love you.
The fruit is so good. It is. It's the best in the world. I feel
There's
so
the
like
reason
weirdly
why their teeth are no good over there.
honestly, and like,
Sorry, I
and
don't
why
really mean
Australians
that.
are so good looking.
We are.
We really are. Like when I got home and I was like going through Sydney and I was like, wait, is this what I look like to everyone? Oh my gosh.
I am hot.
Australians are so healthy. Like we're always doing things outside. Like it's just, it's such a joy. And when I talk about like fruit to people and describe like, oh, the mandarins, they're so beautiful. Like they're so juicy and sweet, and oh, you should taste the grapes, blah, blah, blah. It's like I've like, they're like looking at me like, are you okay? Like, why are you obsessed with fruit, you freak show? But we've got this like this, we have all of our fruit and veggie that's grown here, and like such a small population, we can feed everyone. But over there, because the country is so small and the population is so big, they don't have access to the same sort of fruits. Here I am obsessed with it. I'm sorry. This is what happens when you go to the UK for 6 months and you don't see the sun.
You're you're finishing that in the next 6, is that right?
So I've got one more term of structured learning, and then I have to write my thesis over the summer.
You cute banana. Was that a great decision? That's the question now. Hindsight, you can always a decision is a good one, regardless of the outcome. But for you, what has this been for you to sort of go away from that spotlight and all that it brings, good and bad, to the work that you're doing at Oxford?
I think it's been so wonderful. It was the best thing that I could have ever done. I think I've learned and grown in ways that I would never have been able to if I stayed. And I think also, even though my life was so wonderful before I left, I'm so lucky. I have so much gratitude for all of the opportunities and things that I got given. But if I would have stayed and just kept going, then I think I would have always had in the back of my mind, I really should have done that. And that was always something that I was envious of others for having done. And I think
love it.
I would have always resented not having done it, even though I would have been content and fine. Now that I'm back, I'm it's just the best place. It's so warm and lovely and easy to live in Australia. The UK is difficult in ways that you can't quite quantify. The winter is long and the skies are really gloomy, and it's charming in lots and lots of ways. But I love it here.
It was really beautiful reading too that walk into journalism for you as a young Brooke was actually probably what has made kind of the foundation of decisions ever since. And that first decision to do journalism was a particular incident, I think, where there was writing and public discussion around an incident, around an Aboriginal event that I'm not aware of, but that you were at the time, where is the Indigenous writing, the voices, the people to actually tell the story? So little Brooke said, bugger it, I'm going to go and do that work.
Yeah, so we had this big thing happen in my family, and then I think it was not long after the intervention in the Northern Territory. And there were all of these stories in different Aboriginal communities around the country. And I remember there was one out in Burke, I think that the Sydney Morning Herald had done or another paper had done. And I just thought if you were to look at these without any, if you didn't know any blackfellas, if you had never sort of learned what the full context was or the full history of things were, then you would be wow, why are these outcomes like this? This is one group of people that just has much worse outcomes than the rest of the country. Why is that? And I think that it affects the self-esteem of not only Aboriginal people, because you look at it and you're oh, this is misery, but also of other Australians to know that these. Fred Hollows, I think, has this quote, or maybe it's he borrowed it from Gandhi or something. It's you can tell that the measure of a country is how they treat their most disadvantaged. And I think that the broader Australian population feels that in their bones and knows that, in our country we have some of the worst outcomes, not just in in a regional context. I saw something the other day that said in some communities the outcomes are as bad as what they are in Sierra Leone. It's Sierra Leone. And this is Australia, the best country in the world. We have so many resources. We have the wherewithal to be able to do things about this. And so then I thought, well, if there were Aboriginal journalists who could talk to people about these things with the full context, or at least cared enough to sort of dig deeper and provide it, then we would all be better off for it, I think. So that's why, I was
Would you have made the same decision knowing now what you know, when we look back and we see the burden that a very small population of, Aboriginal journalists and media personalities, Stan Grant, Tony Armstrong, we can name them, and yourself have had to endure as being those voices? Is it still something that you would have done?
Yeah, because I think I always make the decisions that I make based on like what my values are, and I think I would have arrived at the same conclusion like that, no matter how much pain I endured or how difficult it was for me, that it was like the right thing to do. And I think part of the way that I think about things like that is not like, oh, I want my grandparents and my mum to be proud of me, and I want people to look at me and think like, oh yes, good on her, she's able to do it. But I want my like nieces and nephews and my children, if I have them, or like the people who come after me, to be like, oh, I'm proud of her. Because I think it's better to be a good ancestor than it is to be like a good grandchild.
Oh, let's meditate on that for a moment. That's such a beautiful thing to think about, because that idea, and obviously very strong within Indigenous cultures around the country, is that idea of ancestorship and eldership. And that's a very, revered space. But that you're already thinking about that is such an important distinction in terms of how you've thought about your choices in your life.
Well, I think there's no other way that it could have gone. I think, and even if like say I had a choice where I could go back and like flick a switch and my life would have been easier in certain ways and more difficult in others, I think like because I feel content and I feel kind of happy with the person that I am, you have to accept that at some stages there are rough patches. I was just talking to Michelle about this afternoon, that none of us are immune to feeling pain or feeling sadness or going through rough patches, because you have to accept that is just part of being human. Like I'm so special that I deserve to be free from pain for my whole life. Like what sort of outcome would that lead to? It wouldn't make me stronger. I would for sure be weaker and like probably less principled if my life was heaps easier, or if I'd made choices where there was no friction. It's like those things make you stronger, even if they don't make you stronger. Like I don't know. I mean, I guess you try to make meaning.
There's
from
clarity,
them.
isn't there?
There's clarity, but also
to...
it's like we can't excuse ourselves from that
Yeah.
part of the experience because it doesn't have good consequences.
Yeah. We'll move into some other stuff in a moment, but all of these aspects of the essays that are written, as you say, your indigeneity is such an important bedrock and a thread through everything. You did, I mentioned Stan Grant before. He comes up in the book, reflecting on some of your time at the ABC, in comparison in some ways to the time that you spent at Channel 9, where you felt like there wasn't sort of a culture of pulling you back or not giving you opportunities. But when Stan Grant spoke about his experience of racism at the ABC, you write that it was like a punch in the guts.
Yeah. That was really hard for a lot of reasons, because it's like it was awful to see him go through that, because he's just such a wonderful thinker, and I love his writing. Like the way he expresses himself and our experience, I think it's inimitable. Like he's incredible. And the breadth of his experience as well, like being overseas and then being able to, provide that full context as well. Like I think he's just so clever, and we're so lucky to have him.
And I've heard he calls up, other kind of Indigenous Aboriginal people in the media to say, are you going okay? Did you have that experience with him?
I actually have checked in on him.
Yeah.
And like when I've written things, I think I wrote something a couple of years ago about the Mile Creek massacre for the Sydney Morning Herald, and he reached out then. He's like, that was really good writing. Like, thank you for that. And then, like, even when I first started, he'd just come back from being overseas, and so I was at NITV, and he was there, sort of mentoring us and helping us sort of tell stories. So to have someone of that caliber come and sort of teach you and guide, our work we were so lucky. And I think it would be remiss of me to not to mention that I think like I would only have ever been able to have the career I've had because he did all of those things before. And so like people know that blackfellas are capable of greatness because they could see like someone else doing it. So they're like, okay, well, let's give her a shot at, trying to do something. I think the difference between commercial TV and being at the ABC for me was like there was so much trepidation to give me any opportunities because they didn't want to do something that seemed tokenistic, and then so they sort of didn't want to push me forward for something, and then if I fail be like, oh, see, like, you know, we shouldn't have let her do that. Whereas like at Channel 9, like the data's there, the facts are there. We get ratings the day after like we're on air, and then minute by minute. So if people don't like you, then like Channel 9's not going to be like, oh, let's give her a shot, you know, like we're a charity. They're not. You're going to get sacked. If people don't want you on TV, then you're not going to be there. And I think for me that was like, I think for a lot of people that would be really terrifying. But I was like, yes, like measure me, like, you know, let me at them, because if I fail, like at least I've done so on merit. And if I win, then great, like that's on merit too. And
I love that.
So then like every time they would put me forward for an opportunity, it would be because they genuinely wanted me to do it, or because they genuinely believed that I could, or because they saw some like commercial benefit from it. And that's wonderful to be measured in the same way that everyone else is, and be able to be like, yeah, see, blackfellas are good at stuff.
Did you reach out to Stan when he came out with his experience?
Yeah. So in the book, I talk about how when I saw that he'd given that final speech on Q&A, and it was so awful to see him going through that and to see him so wounded, because then I had to sort of admit like, oh, like we're not pretending anymore that we're okay with it. Like now, if you're admitting that it hurts you, then like now I can't pretend that I'm impenetrable. Like I've got this armor that, you know, where I don't see the comments or where I don't hear what people are saying, because we do, and it hurts.
Yeah.
And if he's so wounded by it that he doesn't want to do it anymore, then what does that say about me and not my capacity for enduring harm, but like my capacity for enduring it for what reason? Like, why do I want to do this? Why am I making myself this target? And yeah, it was like, oh no, I'm see-through. Everyone knows what I feel because he's just said it. It was awful.
Wow. That's so big and important for us to hear and understand as well, that that's the experience that kind of penetrates and permeates what it is like in those spaces and living in intersections and having that. What I found, though, about that see-throughness with these essays is that your generosity for that is incredible. You talk about huge things. We talk about, as we've just spoken about for some time, your indigeneity, and you go into such interesting expression of that, but also topics that we don't talk about enough around fertility. And it felt really strong when you were talking about it, that I'm doing this because I want to make sure that other women that are ever in my situation will also know they're not alone or have questions around this. How have you felt with this coming out? Were you nervous about the intimacy of some of these conversations?
Do you know, when I first wrote about it like a few years ago, and I felt like, oh, this is fine. Like people should know about this. This is just information. Like, sure, everyone loves information. I love information. Who doesn't want information? And then like after it came out, and it like sort of went gangbusters, and I was like, oh no, I've like betrayed myself a little bit here, because you're admitting that like you haven't sort of like graduated to other milestones that other people have, or like there's some sort of like you feel like hollow in some sort of way, or like you have a yearning for something that you haven't been able to fulfill. And so I felt, then I was like, oh no, like I felt really self-conscious about it. But I do think, you know, ignoring things doesn't make them go away. Like I think that people should get their fertility tested. Like we're having children later and later in life. And like the idea that people would miss out on the chance to do it because they just didn't have the info or they didn't sort of think about it, that's so heartbreaking.
Yeah. And I love the purity with which you come to discuss, you know, the self for the benefit And then you're like, oh, shit. There's actually an outcome of sharing this intimacy. But that there is, with you, there has just been this, and you called it naivety before when you were like, well, everyone kind of talks about this stuff and I wasn't aware that we didn't all talk about this stuff. Such integrity in that approach. And again, what makes that celebrity chapter so fascinating is you're disjunct with it because it doesn't have necessarily always those intentions in mind, what the self is doing and why they're doing it. I also loved very much your discussion around your family, Nanny Nola and Mum, and just almost like your understanding through different essays of that life that you grew up in and finding peace with it in some way.
I think, like the world is full of disappointed children, right? Like we all kind of go through different iterations of, feeling certain ways about our parents and ways that they've failed us or ways that they've been wonderful. And I think for me, when I wrote that, I was really nervous. That was the one that I lost like a lot of sleep over. And I was like, maybe I shouldn't include it, but it's my favourite essay in the whole book.
You and your mum at a Bonds, is this the one? Yeah. Where there's a photo shoot.
It wasn't the same as Robert Irwin's photo shoot, I might add. There were no snakes or goannas involved in the making of those photos.
There's always time in the future, Brooke. There's always time.
Never say never.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, there was this moment of like real like clarity and honesty between Mum and I. So they got us to do like a Mother's Day shoot in pajamas. It was really sweet. And then they were asking us questions in front of each other about each other. And I was like, this is so cringe. They said to Mum something like, what was Brooke like when she was little or like something. And then she was like, oh, I knew that she was always going to be okay because she was, always been this way and I've always felt like she was special and, I knew that she's so strong even from when she was little. And then she said this thing because I always thought, oh no, I'm such a people pleaser. Like I always try to make everyone feel comfortable and like put others' needs before mine. Like, why do I always have to do this? It's so lame. And then she was like, she framed it in a way that was like, ever since she was little, all she's ever done is make other people happy when they're around her.
Oh.
It makes me feel like crying even just thinking about it. And like having her express all of these things about me, like she always knew that I was going to be okay, even though we were going through all of these like really difficult things. And like to be able to sort of put that in the essay and contextualize it with the way that she had been parented and the way that my grandmother had been parented and so on and so forth. I sent it to her and I was like absolutely shitting myself. And I was like, oh no, she's going to hate it. And I was like, I just need you to read this and like I need you to show Nan and I need you to show like the aunties and stuff to get like permission to talk about these things because it's like really deep-seated family, issues, trauma. And this is on like Facebook Messenger. And then she just sent me like 2 words back, ring me.
Oh, no.
I was like, oh, no.
No.
And they're feeling like I was going to get grounded or something. I was like, oh, I don't want to call. No. And then so I called her straight away and there was a sort of silence at the end of the line. And I was like, hello, Mum. And she was crying.
Oh.
And she was like, I feel like you've just described exactly how I feel. Like I feel so seen by reading this. Like and she was like drawing breath like that. And I was like, oh my, that's like the perfect response. And I was like, oh, thank you so much. And I was like, are you okay with me sharing this? And she's like, yep. And I think for her, like, going back to what you were saying before about when you meet other blackfellas or you see other blackfellas if they're in like big positions, but even if they're not, you just like know what their experiences are. And the statistics tell us that anyway. You know what their experiences are, so there's like a camaraderie for having gone through things or like at least like an empathy or an awareness that you like, we see each other, we sort of know. And I think for her to be able to like alleviate anyone's suffering by sharing allowing me to share her experiences was like healing for her.
How beautiful. What who would have thought pajama photography would have been that deeply profound for you and your mama? And again, we're about to open up questions. I've got 2 more for you. Nani Nola features so beautifully in these essays. And you say, I know she loved me because she knew me and she died before she saw me kind of excel in my life, but she loved me just for who I am. What a beautiful reflection that is.
I think even in families or even in, and I don't have this experience, but you want to know that people love you just for being who you are. Like that thing that I said that my mum said about me. It's you don't want, you always have this idea when you get a little bit of a profile. I don't know if you have this too, but people are so nice to you. They are so nice. They're so generous in ways that they're just not when you're not famous or when you're not on TV or whatever. Even if you go to a shop, and I've noticed it and I know it's true because now when I'm in Oxford, people are just kind of normal. And I'm like, oh, yeah, humbled. I've been humbled. But it's the equivalent of when you get on the Qantas plane and they're like, welcome back, Miss Boney. You're I know you don't care. You're only saying this because, you saw the name. Yeah. It's for her, I know that her love for me was so genuine because there was none of that. It's sort of just stripped bare. And the fact that she went through everything she went through, this is my great-grandmother. So you can imagine the things that were going on when she was little. There were kids being taken. There were, they lived in missions. They got rations and, I think she worked as a domestic servant in Sydney for a while. They wouldn't have been paid. Imagine how they would have been treated. They wouldn't have even been considered as classed as humans.
And they weren't at that point.
They weren't. So she would have been treated appallingly, but she still had the strength to be soft.
That's a gorgeous reflection too. The strength to be soft. It's so true, isn't it? Because you were sort of describing your mum as hardening in some ways because of so much stuff happening.
Yeah.
But then softness can come when you find that strength again.
It's hard to be soft when the world is cruel, I think.
You described that so beautifully in this book. Such a truth around that and how we find ourselves having to put armour up and how then we are in the world until we can feel safe again, which can be a lifetime potentially.
Some people, that once they harden, they never go back.
Yeah. Just go and do a Bonds ad.
Go and do a Bonds ad with your mum. Thoroughly recommend it.
As therapy.
Or with Robert Irwin, whoever's available, really.
Yeah. Again, I'm going to open this up to questions for you, but before I let you at her, I do want to know, because I'm so fascinated by your brain and the way that you have navigated this really incredible life. Where are you going to go?
I don't know.
Little lady.
I wish I had some sort of secret answer where I could be something's cooking, check in soon. I don't. I honestly don't.
Check out my Insta.
Yeah, stay tuned. I don't have any plans.
How do you feel about that?
I'm shit scared, obviously. I'm terrified. But I just think it's going to be fine. It'll be okay. It'll be what it is.
Yes. Don't laugh at that.
Yeah.
Because it's very true.
I might end up going to live with my mum after this, actually. No. I don't know. I think it's a nice position to be in, and it's such a luxury that I get to have that.
To study. Well, let's be frank. The luxury is you going to do study to then bring back into this community and this world in ways that are really productive. So it's not like you're doing a degree in how to paint your nails to feel good. Why did I say that?
I do like painting my nails to feel good, actually.
That's actually a legitimate thing to do as well. It's on page 75.
Yeah.
But, that this work is always with such deep integrity and with such deep intention, even if you don't know where this is going.
Yeah.
You have a sense of your place and what your role might be in this world, as do we. And it's been an enormous pleasure just to have a little poke around in that mind of yours tonight. Brooke Boney, let's not give her a final clap because it's time to hand over to you. But I just want to show my appreciation for this evening's conversation. Oh, let's do it. We can clap twice.
A little one. Yeah.
That was a pitter-patter, and then when we finally finish, it will erupt. But if you have questions, how do you feel?
Yeah. Please.
Ready?
Yeah,
ready to go?
Come on.
Raise your hand. We've got microphones coming around. Any of those burning questions? What's Karl Stefanovic really like? Come over to this in the middle here. Let us know who you are, because it's a bit dark.
Yeah, my name's John. Can you truly love a country if you don't love the first people that are so deeply a part of it?
Well, that's the question that I ask myself, like it's such a core part of our identity. And that's, I think, why I struggled so much with the referendum, because I was like, this was such a small mercy, and I feel like I'd given so much of myself. I'd been so generous in asking people to understand us and like trying to do all of that stuff, give context to things without attributing blame, without, casting aspersions, without, trying to make people feel guilt, for their, for whatever. And then to have it be so conclusive and like so swift, it was heartbreaking, because I think I always thought that Australians like did have like a space for us or a love for us that was, that we're all part of this. Like this is the home of the oldest continuing culture of anywhere in the world. And despite all of the efforts of those, who wish to do bad to erase it, like we survived, and that's something that we should all be proud of. And so then to feel so unloved in your own country, I think it was something that was really, really difficult to come to terms with. And I only feel like that's been, like I've sort of been lifted from that despondency by being in Oxford, because now I kind of understand why people make the decisions that they make when they feel like there's scarcity of resources, or when they feel fearful, or even why like politicians are inspired to create certain policies, because they do genuinely, some of them genuinely believe that they are designing policy for the greater good or for the most amount of people. And so like that sort of even alleviates some of that pain. But it's, I don't know, like you'd have to ask people who feel like they don't love Aboriginal people if they can truly love their country.
Great question and beautiful answer. Any more questions? So many questions.
G'day, my name's Jessie. I'm really interested in your view as someone who has a long experience as a journalist in this country in more traditional media, and there's a really interesting discussion, I'm imagining, as a, politics nerd that you've been following as well, this interplay around kind of traditional media and now particularly young female influencers. And I don't know if you class yourself as that, but I am influenced by you on Instagram. So you're an influencer in my mind a little bit as well. But there's this really interesting political discussion with the federal election around the role that female influencers are playing in media and being brave about having political views. And I guess I'm just interested in your view as someone who's experienced both, your traditional journalism and now this discussion that's playing out, your view on that role of...
I feel like there's a couple of things there. Firstly, like, this distinction between traditional media and new media like Instagram or TikTok or even podcasts. I think that, when people were creating podcasts that were fracturing audiences and dispersing these opinions that sometimes weren't rooted in fact but were political, people were sort of happy to let that slide, or like happy to sort of let that commentary run. But then when there are young women who are saying, things on TikTok or on Instagram with not newsreader voices where we speak deeper and try to sound authoritative or like men, that people are like, oh no, No. Not for me. Look, girls, don't stop talking about politics. You don't know about it. So I feel like it's gendered, firstly, that people are not willing to take it seriously. And I think that people dismiss that part of our experience at their own peril. Because, I mean, look at the way that girlhood was celebrated by people like Taylor Swift, or, you know, even the communities that rally around other artists or whatever, because they can celebrate those sorts of things rather than dismiss them. So I feel like, you know, for the parts of our community who want to dismiss them, let them go. Like, fine, don't listen to it, but other people will. And I think in terms of like traditional media, I love traditional media so much. Like I really love TV and I love the paper, and I think I always will. But, you know, things evolve and, you know, we can't resist that. I think that, you know, for us to be like, oh no, our audiences are splintering and going in all of these like different directions because there's all of these ways for them to get information. It's like we need to evolve too. And, you know, if that means that we do things in a slightly different way, then so be it. I mean, we've all seen those memes from like, I don't know, like Aristotle writing to someone else being like, oh, I lament the fact that people are writing notes or writing things down now because paper and ink is so readily available. What happens to people's memories when they get to write things down? Like every iteration of evolution in terms of like sharing information is resented by the people who are a part of it. Like every time. And we're always like, oh no, like kids are playing video games. Like we'd be loving if kids are playing video games now and not like looking at TikTok. I don't know, like,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? There's so much resistance.
Absolutely.
When will we learn?
Yeah. I know when you look back at that exact example of, oh my gosh, reading books, what a disruption to our, you know, our living. And obviously that just is repeated throughout whatever new technology comes through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's gendered to me. That's my read of it. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think it's gendered?
Oh, yes, sister. Absolutely. I really, really do. I think and that the way that we see young girls, particularly, and how we move those into those different generations, it's always about, and when you said lower voice, I've done the same thing. Unconsciously lowered my voice for radio to be taken more seriously. You know, that
I do it all the time.
Yeah.
Even if I have to ask a question like in class or if I have to speak in like a seminar, I'll like sit up straight and I'll be like, well, actually, my read of that was that I'm like, I know I have the like highest voice ever. It's like so thin and soft. And who am I trying to kid?
Yeah.
But for some reason, I subscribe to that. Like that.
Well, because that's
as well.
what has actually been successful. That's
Yeah.
what actually works. So it's not certainly choices that, you know, females, et cetera, are making around how we interact. But who cares what I think? Another question from anyone here, down the front or wherever you might find.
Hello.
There we go.
Hi. Not on a lighter note, but not politics. I love my sport,
Oh, yes.
and I love the way you love Test cricket. And
There's bits in the book on
Yes.
Test cricket.
Yeah, did you? Yeah.
I'm halfway through it.
Oh, fantastic.
I bought the book yesterday.
Oh, great.
And I love how you explained the 6 balls in an over.
Yeah,
and
because
how,
when I try to explain it to people who don't like cricket, I'm like, you just like, okay, it could change at any second. Like, don't you understand the tension? Like any sort of good experience or storytelling or narrative is about the tension between things. And so you've got this like long game that could change like on a dime. Like say if it starts raining or if there's a crack in the pitch and then one side is smoother than the other. That's like I say it's poetry. How could you not be excited
I
by
need you to
that?
explain this
like
to
Test
me.
cricket, like I love it. And my bucket list is Lords. So I'm sure.
I think I'm going to be
Yes.
there in July. Yeah.
That's right, for the championship match,
Yeah.
against South Africa, I think it is.
Yeah.
So, and your love of footy and the Sydney Swans.
Yeah, I love the
And the way you
Swans.
described it as a coliseum. I enjoyed that part.
Yeah.
So that's the part I'm at now. So, so I've got to
A
read the rest
love
tonight.
review from
A sporting
the third
review.
row. What are you giving it out
I
of 5
love
right
it.
now? 5 stars?
Oh, yeah, definitely,
Yeah,
yeah.
come
yeah.
on.
Oh,
I don't
thank
usually
you.
read books. I only read biographies. So I enjoyed it, yeah.
Oh,
and
thank
just say
you.
I'm a big fan of the Today Show. So it's
Oh,
yes.
wake up
big
with today.
fan.
Fantastic.
I've got problems.
I think we've got time for one more question.
but
Oh, listen to the voice on Gordon. Look out. You could be a broadcaster.
I really resonated with the comment you made about excelling to be normal for people of color.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, what's your experience in a UK context, whether it's at Oxford or just generally in the broader society, around multiculturalism in the UK compared to Australia, for example?
It's so different because you're like removed, for me, like as an individual, you're removed from your indigeneity because people are just like, who is she? Like, what are you? They just think that you're like not white, but they don't really know what you are, which kind of happens to me here as well, to be honest.
Yeah.
And so there's this like all of that pressure, all of that responsibility to explain things and be sort of gentle with the way that I describe things so as not to attribute blame. It's sort of removed. And so you can just sort of exist in the world without people wanting your opinion on things like all the time, which is such a relief. Like after the last couple of years, it just felt like it's been a real gift. I think like the discussion that they have about race in the UK, it's really interesting because it's mixed in with a whole bunch of different things. Like the way they think of class is so intense. And so like, you know, there's super posh people and, you know, there's like, you know, people who are like watching EastEnders or on EastEnders, you know, like there's this whole sort of mix going on. And one of the big discussions that they're having at the moment is around reparations and around the slave trade. It's so interesting to be there for it. And funny story actually. They tried to get me like on the news on the BBC to talk about something, and my friend works for the BBC, and he messaged me and I was like, "Do you reckon I should do this? Like they're trying to get me to come on this panel. Like I don't know the UK audience as well as I know the Australian audience, so I feel like it's harder to communicate big ideas." And he was like, "Brooke, you've been here for a week. Please don't get cancelled." Okay, good advice. I might just stick to my study for now. But the way they talk about like reparations and the slave trade is, I think, kind of borrowed from the US context. And so they're like, oh, you know, what we should do is find out who the families were, who were the beneficiaries, and make them pay. And it's sort of really easily traceable for them. And then they're like, well, you know, some of the slave traders were black people themselves and oppressed their own people. So maybe we should, you know, maybe we ought to find their descendants and seek reparations from them. But there's this massive blind spot when it comes to colonisation, imperialism, and like all of these other tentacles that the UK has spread throughout the world, and this real reluctance to engage with any conversations about it. So the closest that we've come, and it's getting closer, is repatriation of artefacts, which is something that I'm really interested in. This is me nerding out right now. This is me.
We love
Oxford.
this.
So like the British Museum has all of these artefacts that are taken from other places all around the world. I think there's like 40,000 Indigenous artefacts in UK museums. Hardly any of them are on display. And so now there's this discussion like, well, should we give them back? Like, what do we do with them? Some of them are really valuable. And so the British Museum has this, it's like an act of parliament, I think, that prevents them from, you know, repatriating artefacts. And now there's a discussion, which I think like Jeremy Corbyn is like one of the leading voices for, obviously, where they're like, well, no, actually, if we've taken some Aboriginal artefacts, then there's no way that they were taken with consent, so we should give them back. And they're arguing about the Elgin marbles from Greece at the moment. And the argument that they're having in court is that they were given to Britain. And so they can't ask for them back. But in an Australian context, it's really interesting because it's all tied in with colonisation. And so I feel like maybe there's about to be a sort of big moment or some sort of reckoning with the impact of those things.
That's enormous, and how that hasn't really filtered through here as much to understand the dynamics of that. Obviously, we're aware of that conversation, but that's quite hot right now, you know, is a really interesting thing.
Well, the whole country's built on those foundations,
Yeah.
right? Like their wealth is accumulated because of taking
Theft.
things from other places,
Yeah.
that's uncomfortable.
What a great way to end our conversation tonight. Uncomfortable truths, which you do with such grace And this book is a real treasure. All of it, Brooke Boney. Again, really honoured to have a conversation with you tonight. And thank you for your work. Sounds really trite, but I feel so grateful for the fact that you stood up and you are visible and you are what you are. And you've made some fantastic and fascinating decisions. And I cannot wait to see what more will come. Brooke Boney, everybody.
Thank you.
You can go and buy books and Brooke will sign
I'm
them.
going to sign some of them in a minute. Yeah, I'll be back out.
This is the weird bit where we sit here and don't quite know how to get off stage. So if you could just
We
keep
should just, like,
clapping.
fall back and,
let's
roll
just
off.
do a tumble.
Yeah.
And but everyone's moving.
Yeah, okay,
Will,
great.
thank you so much for coming out on a Friday night and for joining us this evening. Beautiful.